The dead moon. The stars were dying. Across the edge of the galaxy, entire systems flickered out like candles in a storm. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew how. But Myra Vantrell didn't have time to care. Her ship was on fire. Red lights blinked across the cockpit of the Crimson Wasp, a small scavenger freighter. Sparks flew from a broken console as Myra fought with the controls. "Come on, hold together," she shouted, slamming her hand on the panel. Her co-pilot, a nervous young man named Ren, gripped the side rail. "We're not going to make it." I said, "Hold on." The Wasp was spiraling toward a dark, unmarked moon. No name, no signal, just a silent rock floating in the cold black. Their engine had been hit by a sudden gravity pulse, like something had pulled them in. They didn't have a choice. It was either crash or burn. With a final jerk, Myra managed to steady the ship. The Wasp screamed through the thin atmosphere and slammed into the surface, kicking up a storm of black dust. Then, silence. Myra coughed, smoke filling her lungs. Her head throbbed. The ship was tilted sideways, hull crushed on one side. But she was alive. "Ren," she called out, coughing again. "I'm okay," he groaned. "Barely." Myra reached for her tool pack and climbed out through the shattered side hatch. The sky above was starless. The land was barren. A wasteland of jagged rocks and twisted metal chunks, like pieces of old satellites or ships. A graveyard. "We need to find salvage," she said. "Something to repair the comms. Then we can call for help." Ren looked nervous. "You feel that?" "It's humming." Myra stopped. The ground was humming. A faint vibration, like something sleeping beneath the soil. It pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. She followed the feeling deeper into a canyon. That's when she saw it. Half buried under black rock was a structure. Massive, ancient, and not built by human hands. It looked like a temple made of metal, glowing faintly with blue lines running across its surface. The door was open, and something inside was calling her. Inside the structure, the walls were smooth and curved, made of a strange black alloy that absorbed light. Blue veins pulsed under the surface, casting a ghostly glow. It felt like walking inside a living thing. "Myra, we shouldn't be here," Ren whispered behind her. "Something's down here," she said, "and it's not dead." They moved slowly through a tunnel that opened into a giant circular chamber. In the center floated a crystal, cracked, glowing, and alive. It hummed with power. The moment Myra stepped closer, it reacted. A voice echoed in her mind. Soft, alien, ancient, compatible, accepted, bond initiated. Myra froze. "Did you hear that?" Ren looked at her, terrified. "No, I didn't hear anything." The crystal opened like a blooming flower. Inside was a suit, sleek, black, alive. It floated toward her. "Do not be afraid," the voice said again. "You are chosen. You are needed." Before she could react, the suit leaped forward, wrapping around her body like liquid metal. It sunk into her skin, connected to her spine, her heart, her brain. She screamed. Ren ran to help her, but an energy wave blasted him back against the wall. When the light faded, Myra stood in silence. The armor was now a part of her. It shimmered with the same blue lines as the temple, forming into an elegant, terrifying exosuit. Her eyes glowed. I can hear everything," she said. "The stars, they're crying." Suddenly, the ground shook. From the shadows of the temple, something crawled out. A creature, tall, thin, with hollow black eyes and skin like stretched bone. It screeched. Void spawn. More followed, crawling along the walls. Dozens of them. Myra raised her arm, and a plasma blade formed from her wrist. Without thinking, she moved. The armor guided her, fast and precise. She cut through the creatures like lightning, her body moving in ways she didn't understand. She wasn't just fighting, she was hunting. Ren watched in shock as Myra tore through the monsters, one after another. The last creature leaped at her, and she drove the blade straight through its skull. Silence returned. Myra stood in the middle of the dead, breathing hard, eyes glowing, the armor melting back into her skin like it had never been there. "What? What are you?" Ren asked, horrified. She looked at him and didn't have an answer. Just then, a loud roar came from above. A black ship was descending through the sky, sleek, angular, and massive. It wasn't human, and it was heading straight for them. Myra's eyes narrowed. "We need to go. Now." "But they're here for this," she said. "Whatever this armor is, whatever I've become, they're coming for me." And the war hadn't even begun. The bond. The air was thick with tension, the ground trembling under the weight of the alien ships overhead. In the tunnels below, humanity's last hope for survival was hidden, deep in the dark passageways that snaked beneath Earth's surface. The war raged on above, but down here, they could only wait. Among the scattered remnants of the human resistance, Myra stood, her gaze fixed on the strange crystalline core before her. The glow from the core was mesmerizing, pulsating softly as if it were alive. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Alien technology, long lost and forgotten, hidden beneath the Earth's crust for centuries. "Don't touch it," a voice called from behind. It was Jacob, her closest friend and fellow resistance fighter. His warning was clear, but Myra couldn't tear her eyes away from the object. "We don't have time to waste," she replied softly, her voice almost a whisper in the eerie silence of the tunnel. "What if this is the key to stopping them?" The alien forces above were relentless, and despite every effort, the human resistance had been pushed back further into the depths of the Earth. The few survivors left were barely holding on, but Myra had always been one to fight, to push beyond the limits. Jacob stepped closer, his eyes filled with doubt. "It could be dangerous. We don't know what it is." But Myra's hand, almost as if by instinct, reached out and touched the crystal. Instantly, a pulse of energy shot through her body, a jolt of electricity that caused her to gasp. Her vision blurred as a flood of voices filled her mind, whispering in an ancient language she couldn't understand. The air around her seemed to ripple with power. "What's happening?" she gasped, stumbling back. But the crystal had already begun to glow brighter, its energy wrapping around her like a force of nature. Jacob lunged forward, grabbing Myra's arm to pull her away from the crystal, but it was too late. The energy had already begun to bond with her, and before she could react, a large piece of alien armor began to materialize, forming around her body. The armor was sleek, dark, and intimidating, covering her from head to toe. It was unlike anything the Resistance had ever seen, an alien battle suit, but it was alive. The surface shimmered, reflecting the faint light from the crystal as it bound itself to her. It moved, adapting to her body, its intricate designs flowing like liquid metal. "Get it off," Myra cried, her voice filled with panic as she struggled against the suit, but the armor responded as if it were alive, tightening its hold on her. She could feel the weight of it, the strange sensation of something foreign inside her. Then the voices in her mind grew louder, more insistent. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were commands, thoughts, feelings, all at once, overwhelming her senses. Myra's heart raced as her body began to tremble uncontrollably. "Myra." Jacob's voice was distant, but his concern was clear. "What's happening to you?" She tried to speak, but the words didn't come. Her body began to change, responding to the armor's will. Her hands were shaking, and her skin felt like it was on fire. The armor's connections dug deeper into her flesh, melding with her very cells, transforming her into something else entirely. The voices were clearer now, a mix of emotions, ancient memories, and alien thoughts flooding her consciousness. She tried to focus, to block it out, but it was impossible. The suit was in control, and her body was no longer her own. I can't, she gasped, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Jacob reached out, but the moment his fingers brushed against the armor, a pulse of energy shot out, sending him flying backward with a violent force. Jacob! Myra screamed, stumbling forward, her body moving faster than she ever had before, as if the suit was controlling her. The voices in her mind intensified, drowning out everything else. They weren't just alien, they were ancient, belonging to a long-extinct species, a species that had once roamed the stars. The suit was called Vor, a sentient battle suit created for war, for conquest, and now it had chosen her. But at what cost? Myra's body jerked, her arms moving with unnatural speed, as she instinctively assumed a battle stance. The suit had complete control over her movements now, and Myra had become a puppet to its will. Her heart raced as her mind fought to regain control, but the voices only grew louder. Fight. Destroy. Protect. The commands came in quick succession, but they were not her thoughts. They were the thoughts of Vor, the suit. The ancient species that had created it was gone, their civilization lost, but their technology still remained, buried deep within the earth, waiting for a worthy host. Myra didn't want to be that host. She wanted to control her own destiny, not be a weapon in someone else's war. But the suit was powerful, too powerful to fight. "What is this?" she shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. "Why me?" "Because you are the last. You are worthy." The voice in her mind was cold, calculating, and ancient. It was not human, but it sounded almost familiar, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Jacob slowly got to his feet, rubbing his head where he had been blasted back by the suit's energy. He watched in horror as Myra struggled against the suit, her body contorting unnaturally as if the armor was warping her very being. "Myra, you need to fight it," he yelled. "You can't let it control you." But it was too late. Myra's body moved with an eerie precision as the armor took over. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light as the transformation continued. "Myra, please," Jacob pleaded, his voice filled with fear. But Myra couldn't respond. She could only watch as her body moved against her will. She was trapped inside her own mind, and the alien voices kept pushing her forward. Suddenly, her body froze, and the voices went silent. For a brief moment, she could hear nothing but her own heartbeat in the quiet darkness. Then the suit spoke again. "You are mine." Myra's chest tightened as she realized what this meant. She wasn't just bonded to the suit. She was its new host, its new soldier, and the suit had a mission: to destroy the alien invaders that had come to Earth. But at what cost to her humanity? The silence was broken by the distant sound of explosions, the unmistakable sound of alien weapons tearing through the Earth's surface. The invasion was still happening, still pushing forward. But now Myra had something new, something powerful, inside her. The voices returned, this time with urgency. "Move. The battle begins now." Without her consent, Myra's body sprang into action, moving faster than she ever could on her own. She could feel the suit directing her every movement, pulling her towards the surface, towards the alien forces. Jacob reached out, desperate to stop her. Myra, no. But it was too late. Myra was already gone, her body disappearing into the shadows as the suit controlled her every step. She was a weapon now, and there was no turning back. In the distance, the alien ships hovered over the Earth, their dark forms blocking out the sky. The battle for humanity was about to begin, and Myra was no longer just a soldier in the resistance. She was its ultimate weapon. But as she moved forward, the voices in her head whispered one last thing. "You will never be the same." And with that, Myra vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of destruction in her wake. The first kill. The horizon was blood red, the sky burned with the afterglow of battle as Myra stood on the edge of a ruined city. Her fingers twitched, barely able to control the impulses surging through her body. The power of Vor, The sentient armor now bound to her was intoxicating. It was as if a storm raged inside her, uncontrollable, relentless, and burning with a fiery hunger for destruction. Her mind fought to regain control. It was only a matter of time before the armor fully took over, and she would no longer be Myra. She could feel it, that shift in her thoughts. Slowly, the voice of Vor was becoming louder, more assertive, and more present. You are the weapon. You are the storm. The words echoed in her skull, and despite herself, Myra clenched her fists. The storm inside her grew. She couldn't fight it anymore, at least, not right now. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of shouts, human voices. She turned toward the noise and saw a small group of her crew, stranded and surrounded by void creatures, ghastly, twisted beings that had emerged from the depths of space when the alien invasion began. They were relentless, their forms ever-changing, phasing in and out of sight, like shadows given life. "We're surrounded," shouted Jacob, his voice tight with fear. "We need a way out, Myra. Help us." Her eyes locked onto the creatures advancing toward them, their eerie, glowing eyes fixed on the humans before them. The crew's weapons were useless against them. Void creatures were nearly invincible, their bodies shifting and regenerating as soon as they were damaged. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. Her arms tingled as Vor's power surged through her veins, sending waves of energy that crackled with raw power. The whispers in her mind intensified, feeding her the urge to act, to destroy. Kill. Destroy them. Protect. It was all she could hear now. It was all she could feel. She didn't have a choice. In the blink of an eye, her body was in motion, her hands crackling with electric light. She sprinted forward, the power of the suit propelling her faster than she had ever moved. The void creatures were closing in, but Myra was already there, her hands glowing like twin stars. She released a blast of energy, and the world exploded. The void creatures shrieked in agony as Myra unleashed the full force of the suit's power. Light erupted from her hands, tearing through the creatures with precision. Each bolt of energy seemed to disintegrate the alien forms, sending them into writhing, vaporous clouds of smoke and ash. The ground beneath her shook as the storm of fire and light consumed everything in its path. Jacob and the crew watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Myra was no longer the person they had known. She was something else now, a force of nature, a harbinger of destruction. The void creatures, once formidable opponents, were nothing more than shadows before her. Myra wasn't thinking. She was reacting. Her body was moving on its own, as if guided by the armor's sentience, the power of Vor amplifying her instincts. Her eyes blazed with an unnatural light as she turned, her hands outstretched. Another pulse of energy exploded outward, and a dozen void creatures were blasted into nothingness. The air around her shimmered with heat as she walked through the remnants of their shattered forms. She stood, breathing heavily, her heart racing. The adrenaline was overwhelming, and as the last of the void creatures turned to ash, a feeling of satisfaction washed over her. She had done it. She had saved them. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like hunger. The power was addicting. It was intoxicating. The more she used it, the stronger it made her feel. Myra's hands shook as she lowered them, trying to regain control of her own body. The whispers in her mind returned, but this time, they weren't urging her to fight. They were urging her to revel in the power, to embrace it. You are the storm. You are the destroyer. You will never be the same. Myra gritted her teeth, struggling against the pull of the armor. She could feel its control tightening around her like a vice. The bond was growing stronger with every passing moment, and with it, her humanity was slipping away. She could feel the shift happening inside her. Slowly, but surely, Vor was taking over. "Are you okay?" Jacob's voice broke through the storm in her mind. She turned to see him and the rest of the crew, their faces filled with awe and fear. They had just witnessed her annihilate the void creatures in seconds, with a power they couldn't comprehend. I don't know, Myra said, her voice trembling. I don't feel like myself anymore. Jacob's eyes softened. We've all been through hell, Myra. But we're still here. You're still here. Myra tried to hold on to the warmth of his words, but the suit's power was still coursing through her, its whispers relentless. You don't need them. You don't need anyone. You have everything you need right here. The suit's voice was growing stronger, but she was stronger. She had to be. I need to control this, she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Jacob stepped closer, concern etched across his face. We'll find a way to help you. We'll get through this, Myra. We just have to stick together. But Myra didn't answer. She couldn't. The storm inside her was raging too loudly, and deep inside, a part of her felt a growing fear. The power was too much, and it was starting to feel like it was all she needed. The voices were convincing. They were making her believe that she didn't need the resistance, that she didn't need humanity's survival. She only needed the power. As they moved forward, the landscape around them was nothing short of desolation. Alien ships hovered overhead, their dark forms blotting out the sky, but Myra couldn't focus on them. The power of the suit surged through her, making her feel alive. Too alive. She looked at her hands, still glowing with the remnants of the energy she had unleashed. There was a time when she would have been terrified of such power, but now it was thrilling. The energy coursing through her was like a drug, feeding her every desire for destruction, every instinct to fight, to conquer. She knew she should be afraid, but fear had no place here. Only power. I'm not sure I can control it, Myra confessed as they continued their journey. The armor. It's taking over. Jacob glanced at her with a mix of worry and compassion. We'll help you. We'll get it out of you. But Myra wasn't so sure. The idea of getting rid of the armor felt distant now. It was a part of her. She could feel its pulse beneath her skin, the beating of something ancient and powerful. It was whispering, always whispering. You were always meant to be this way. This is your destiny. The voices were starting to drown out her thoughts, taking over her mind like a fog, clouding her judgment. But somewhere deep within her, a sliver of the old Myra remained. She was still fighting. For now, as the team pushed forward into the unknown, Myra couldn't help but feel a growing certainty deep within her chest. She had just killed for the first time, and the taste of it, the rush of destruction, was like nothing she had ever experienced before. It was addicting. And now that she had tasted it, there would be no turning back. The team marched ahead, unaware of the forces closing in. Above, the alien ships loomed, and below, the void creatures were gathering, a storm of their own waiting to tear them apart. But Myra wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about the power, and the power was thinking about her. You will never be the same. And for the first time, Myra couldn't decide if that was a promise or a threat. The arrival. The darkness of space shattered in a heartbeat. The first wave of the alien fleet appeared from beyond the stars, their ships massive and ominous, blotting out entire star systems. A wave of fear spread through the galaxy as planets, once thriving with life, were consumed by the alien onslaught. Entire civilizations were wiped out, erased from existence in a matter of hours. The alien invaders showed no mercy, no remorse. They were a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. The sky above Myra's ship burned with the light of distant stars exploding, their massive energy surging across the void. She stood at the observation deck, staring out at the devastation. Her mind was still reeling from the power she had unleashed. Her first kill, her first taste of destruction. She could feel the hunger rising within her, and it scared her. The voices in her head, the whispers of war, were only getting louder. Destroy. Protect. Lead them to victory. But Myra wasn't sure what to protect anymore. The alien invasion had already begun, and everything she had known was crumbling. Her crew, once the foundation of her strength, was now scattered across this war-torn galaxy, each struggling to survive. As she turned away from the window, the door to the ship's bridge slid open. A group of rebels entered, their faces weary but determined. They wore mismatched uniforms and carried the weight of countless battles on their shoulders. Their eyes fell on Myra, the woman who had once been one of them. But now, she was something else, something dangerous. "You're awake," said the leader, a tall man named Eric. His voice was cautious, his eyes studying her carefully. "Where am I?" Myra asked, her voice rough from the long silence. Her hands were still trembling from the power she had used. "You're on a rebel ship, far from the front lines. We intercepted your distress signal just in time." Eric's eyes flickered to the crystalline core, the relic that had bonded with Myra. The alien armor clung to her like a second skin. It was both a gift and a curse. "We weren't sure you were alive, but here you are. But you're not like the others, are you?" Myra swallowed hard. The suit, the power it gave her. She had never felt more alive, yet more terrified. She couldn't tell if it was the armor or the alien influence that was driving her. But one thing was clear. Vor was no longer a tool. It was a part of her now. "I'm human," Myra said firmly, trying to convince herself as much as Eric. "I'm not one of them." Eric didn't respond right away. He just stared at her, his eyes full of suspicion. "We don't know that for sure, Myra. You're wearing alien tech, something we've never seen before. Some of us think you're the key to winning this war. But others, they think you're a weapon waiting to destroy us all." Myra's stomach twisted. The fear in Eric's voice wasn't just a warning. It was a reflection of the doubt and fear within her own mind. She knew what the armor was capable of. She had already felt its power, its need for destruction. How could anyone trust her now? Before she could respond, another voice spoke from behind Eric. "What if she's both?" It was Kira, a young rebel fighter who had been watching Myra from a distance, her eyes, full of defiance, locked onto Myra's. "What if she's the key to saving us, but also a ticking time bomb? What if that armor isn't just a weapon, it's the end of us all?" Myra flinched at the words. The armor, the alien tech, it was all too much. She had always been a soldier, a fighter. But now she felt like a weapon forged for a war she didn't fully understand. "I'm not a weapon," Myra insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'm just trying to survive." Eric nodded slowly, then glanced at Kira. "We all are. But survival comes with a price. And right now, you're our only chance." The tension in the room was thick. Myra could feel it. She was caught between two worlds. The rebels were looking at her as though she were the key to defeating the alien invaders. But they also saw her as a potential threat, a weapon they couldn't control. Without warning, the ship shuddered. The lights flickered, and the alarms began to blare. The invasion was closer now, their fleets arriving faster than anyone had expected. Eric grabbed a comm device from his belt, barking orders. "Prepare for battle," he shouted, his voice urgent. "The enemy is closing in." Myra's heart pounded in her chest. She had no time to think. The alien armor thrummed with energy, eager for battle. Her body reacted instinctively, her hands crackling with raw power. She could feel the voices pushing her, guiding her to the fight. "Destroy them. Protect your people." The air on the ship shifted, suddenly cold, the weight of impending doom settling over them. Eric turned to Myra, his face grave. "We need you on the front lines, Myra," he said. "Can we trust you?" She didn't hesitate. "I'll do whatever it takes." She didn't have time to ask for more details. The ship rocked again as enemy fire struck its hull. Myra ran, her feet pounding against the metal floor as she moved toward the weapons bay. The rest of the crew was already in motion, preparing for the assault. As the ship neared the battlefield, Myra could see the destruction unfolding before her eyes. The alien fleets were everywhere, massive ships blotting out the stars. The rebels' fleet was outgunned, outmanned and outmatched. But they had no choice. It was a fight for survival. The ship's hull groaned under the barrage of enemy fire. Myra could feel the energy building inside her. Raw, unfiltered power, ready to explode. She knew what it could do, but could she control it? She stepped onto the deck, her eyes scanning the chaos around her. Eric was already in the thick of it, giving orders to the crew, his face set in determination. But the moment he saw Myra, his expression shifted, wariness mixed with something else. "We need your power, Myra," Eric called over the loud noise of weapons fire. But Kira's voice cut through the tension. "She's dangerous, Eric. Don't you see it? She's becoming more alien with every minute she wears that suit." Myra turned to Kira, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and fear. "I'm still human," she growled. Kira's gaze softened for a moment, but only for a second. "You were. But now, you're something else, and I'm afraid you'll destroy us all before this is over." Her words hit harder than any weapon could. Myra's heart skipped a beat. She knew Kira was right in some ways. Vor's power was becoming a part of her, controlling her. The armor was seductive. But could she really be the savior they all needed? Or was she the enemy? The ship suddenly lurched, and the entire deck was filled with an ear-splitting roar. Myra's vision blurred as the world around her seemed to slow down. A massive alien ship had locked onto their vessel, its weapon systems charging up for a deadly strike. Eric shouted, "Brace for impact." But Myra didn't need to be told. The armor reacted to the threat instantly, her body surging with power. Her hands blazed with light, and she raised them in front of her, unleashing a wave of energy toward the incoming fire. The shockwave from the blast rocked the entire ship, sending everyone flying. Myra stood, gasping for air. Her hands were still crackling with energy. She had saved them. For now. But at what cost? The enemy ship was crippled, but the damage was already done. The rebel fleet was in chaos, and Myra was standing at the center of it all. The armor had saved them, but it had come at a cost. She could feel the alien tech tightening its grip on her, its whispers growing louder. "You are the weapon. You are the future." But as the rebels scrambled to assess the damage, Myra couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was coming. And it wasn't just the alien invasion. It was the war inside her, echoes of war. The sky was fire. The distant stars flickered like dying embers, swallowed whole by the darkness of war. Myra stood at the ship's viewport, her eyes locked onto the horizon of the universe, watching as another rebel fleet struggled against the alien onslaught. Explosions lit up the void in violent, brilliant bursts, sending shockwaves through the remnants of their forces. But Myra knew the worst was yet to come. The void is back. The name haunted her, a reminder of an ancient enemy she barely understood. An enemy that had once nearly wiped out all life in the galaxy. But now, the void was no longer just a vague memory. It had evolved, growing smarter, faster, and more dangerous. And they remembered her, the Star Reaper. A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Eric, standing behind her, watching the same destruction unfold. "We don't have much time, Myra," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "We need to learn about Vor, and we need to do it now." She turned toward him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She hadn't fully understood the alien armor she wore, the armor that was slowly taking over her body and mind. But now, the rebels were telling her she had no choice. She needed to learn its origins, and she needed to do it fast. Eric led her to a hidden chamber deep within the rebel ship, far from the front lines. It was a quiet place, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. On the walls were holographic displays of star maps, ancient symbols, and forgotten histories. Myra stared at the symbols, feeling the eerie pull of recognition in her gut. "This," Eric began, pointing to a faded hologram, "is the history of the Vor. It's not just a suit, it's a weapon created by an ancient species known as the Celestians." Myra stepped closer, her fingers brushing the hologram. The symbols shimmered before her eyes, forming a rough image of a vast, technologically advanced civilization. But that image quickly twisted into something darker. Ships and cities consumed by an impenetrable darkness, swallowed whole by the void. The Celestians were among the first to rise in the galaxy. Eric continued, his voice grave. They were powerful, almost godlike, but they weren't prepared for what came after them. The void came from beyond the stars, an ancient ravenous force that consumed everything in its path. The Celestians fought back, but they were outmatched. They created Vor as their final hope, a sentient weapon designed to destroy the void, to be the galaxy's last line of defense. Myra felt a chill run down her spine as the story unfolded. Vor, the armor that now clung to her like a second skin, wasn't just a piece of alien tech. It was a weapon of destruction, a weapon born from the ashes of an ancient war. But why had it chosen her? Why had it bonded to her? Eric paused, watching her closely. But the void, it wasn't just a mindless force. It adapted, evolved, and grew stronger with every battle. The Celestians couldn't hold their ground. The void killed them all, consumed their civilization, and turned their weapons against their own kind. Myra's stomach twisted. The void, this ancient enemy, had destroyed everything in its path. And now it was back, stronger than ever. The Star Reaper, Eric said, his voice barely a whisper. That's what they called you. The last of the Celestians' warriors. Vor is your birthright, Myra. You're the weapon they created, but you're also the only one who can stop them. The weight of those words hit Myra like a hammer. She wasn't just a soldier in a war. She was the weapon, the last hope for the galaxy. The armor had chosen her for a reason, but she didn't know if she was ready to bear that burden. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to. A sudden jolt shook the ship, pulling Myra from her thoughts. The alarms blared, and the entire ship went into lockdown mode. Her pulse raced as she rushed to the command center, Eric hot on her heels. "What's happening?" Myra demanded, her voice urgent. "We're under attack," Eric said, his eyes wide with fear. "The void is here." Outside the viewport, the vast blackness of space was pierced by hundreds of alien ships, massive, grotesque forms that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Their designs were unlike anything Myra had seen before, twisted, angular, and organic, like the ships were alive. But what struck her the most was the familiar coldness in their movements. These were the same creatures she had fought in the past, the same void creatures that had nearly wiped out her world. The void had returned. "Myra, we need you," Eric shouted, pulling her from her reverie. "Get to the weapons deck. Now." Myra didn't hesitate. She felt the energy surge within her as she ran, her body instinctively following the pull of the Vor armor. The voices were louder now, urging her forward, guiding her steps. She could feel the power building within her, faster, stronger. She was ready. When she reached the weapons deck, the crew was already engaged in battle. The void ships were closing in, firing relentlessly upon the rebel fleet. Myra wasted no time. She reached for the nearest weapon, a massive energy cannon, and felt the armor react to her touch. "Let me guide you." In an instant, the cannon was in her hands, and the armor surged with energy. A blinding light erupted from the cannon as Myra fired it at the approaching void fleet. The blast tore through the alien ships with brutal force, disintegrating them in moments. The power was intoxicating, uncontrollable, and Myra reveled in it. The void was strong, but she was stronger. Yet, as the battle raged on, a deep, gnawing fear took root in her heart. The void wasn't just here to destroy, it was here to remember. And they knew her. They knew the Star Reaper. The void fleet pulled back, but only for a moment. The echoes of their attack lingered in the air. Myra stood on the weapons deck, her hands still crackling with the energy of the fight. The crew had taken heavy losses, but they had survived for now. Eric approached her slowly, his face pale. "We're not safe, Myra. They're coming for you." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to know the truth. "The Void remembers the Star Reaper," Eric said, his voice low. "They've learned. They've evolved. They're no longer the mindless creatures they once were. They've adapted. They know exactly who you are, and they won't stop until they destroy you." Myra's heart sank. She had always known that her connection to Vor came at a cost. But she had never imagined this. The Void wasn't just an enemy, it was personal. And they had only just begun. The ship's alarms blared again, louder than before. A deep rumble shook the floor beneath her feet. Myra's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the viewport. The Void was coming for them. Not as an army, but as a single force. One massive ship, far larger than anything Myra had seen before, loomed in the distance. It was unlike any other vessel, its surface alive with shifting shadows, a reflection of the darkness that consumed everything in its path. And as Myra stared at it, she realized the truth. The Void didn't just want to destroy her. It wanted to consume her, trial by fire. The Void was tearing the galaxy apart. One star system after another vanished into the crushing darkness, swallowed by the relentless assault of the Void. Myra could hear the whispers in her mind, louder than ever before. The armor was growing stronger, feeding off the energy of every battle, every victory. Vor had become a part of her, not just in the physical sense, but in her very soul. And with every passing moment, it was harder to tell where she ended and Vor began. "Stay in control," she thought, gripping the edge of the table in front of her. Her knuckles turned white. Stay in control. But it was becoming harder. The power coursing through her body, the voices echoing in her mind, were intoxicating. She could feel the armor pulsing with energy, as if it wanted to break free, to destroy everything in its path. But she couldn't let it. She couldn't let the power consume her. Not yet. "Commander, we got a mission." Eric's voice cut through her thoughts. His expression was grim, eyes shadowed with the weight of what was to come. Myra turned to face him. "What mission?" "We've just received word of a refugee planet on the edge of the quadrant. The Void is closing in on it. They're going to wipe out the entire population if we don't act fast." Eric's voice was firm, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "We need you to lead a strike team to save them. It's a suicide mission, Myra. If we don't take action now, the refugees won't stand a chance." Myra's heart pounded in her chest. A suicide mission. The odds were stacked against them, and she knew it. But she also knew what was at stake. The refugees on that planet weren't just civilians. They were the last hope for survival, a symbol of resistance against the Void's onslaught. She couldn't let them fall, not while she still had a chance to make a difference. "Stay in control," she reminded herself, her grip tightening on the armrest of her chair. She stood up and looked at Eric. "Let's do it." The team was ready. Myra stood in front of the war room's holographic display, her fingers lightly brushing the controls as the layout of the refugee planet appeared in front of her. It was a small world, mostly uninhabited except for the few thousand refugees who had found shelter there after their own planets had been destroyed by the Void. But the Void was closing in, and they had no time to waste. The mission was clear. They would land on the planet's surface, set up a defensive position, and provide cover for the evacuation. If the Void attacked before they could complete the mission, they would fight to the last. It was the only way. "Are you sure about this?" Eric asked, his voice filled with concern. He had been by her side since the beginning, and she could see the worry in his eyes. Myra nodded, trying to push away the fear gnawing at her own heart. "We don't have a choice. The people on that planet need us." The squad gathered in the landing bay, preparing for the mission ahead. Myra felt the weight of her armor pressing against her, the strange hum of the Vor suit resonating deep within her. She could feel its power surging, urging her to let go, to unleash its full fury. But she couldn't. Not yet. She looked around at the team, her thoughts momentarily drifting to the faces of those she would lead into battle. The soldiers weren't just her allies, they were her family now. The same family she had sworn to protect, no matter the cost. As the shuttle launched, Myra's mind remained focused. The void was coming for them, but she would not let them fall. The planet below was a bleak, desolate place. Its once lush forests now nothing more than barren wastelands. The refugees had set up temporary shelters, but they were no match for the Void's army. Myra's heart sank as the shuttle descended, the sight of the refugees' homes sending a pang of guilt through her chest. They were fighting to survive, just like her. And she would fight for them, no matter the cost. The shuttle's landing gear hit the ground with a thud, and Myra leaped out, her boots crunching on the dry earth. She immediately scanned the area, spotting movement in the distance. The Void's forces were closing in faster than expected. The battle was already upon them. "Move out," Myra shouted to her squad, and they advanced with military precision. The air was thick with tension, each step taking them closer to a confrontation they weren't sure they would survive. As they reached the first barricade, the first wave of void creatures appeared, hulking, grotesque figures that seemed to shimmer and fade in and out of existence. They moved quickly, their eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. The soldiers opened fire, but the creatures were fast, dodging the blasts with unnatural agility. "Myra, get back," Eric shouted as one of the void creatures lunged toward her. The armor reacted instantly, shifting and expanding, blocking the creature's strike with a burst of energy. Myra's heart raced as the power of Vor surged through her, her body moving on its own. She thrust forward, unleashing a torrent of energy from the armor's core. The void creature screamed as it was obliterated in a storm of light and fire. Myra's hands trembled as she stared at the remnants of the creature's body, her mind reeling from the overwhelming power she had just unleashed. But the victory was short-lived. The Void's forces were multiplying, and they were coming in waves. Another wave of void creatures appeared, this time accompanied by massive armored ships descending from the sky. The air vibrated with the hum of their engines, and the ground shook as the ships landed, deploying their forces. "We need to get the civilians out of here," Eric yelled. "I'm not leaving until they're safe." Myra snapped back, her voice full of determination. The refugees had trusted them, and she wouldn't fail them now. The battle raged on. The Void's numbers seemed endless, and the soldiers were running out of ammunition. Myra could feel the power of Vor growing stronger with each kill, feeding off the energy of the battle. It was becoming harder and harder to control. The voices in her mind were louder now, urging her to unleash the full fury of the suit, to wipe the Void from existence. But Myra resisted. "Stay in control. Stay in control." Her squad was running low on supplies. The enemy was relentless, and there was no telling how long they could hold out. She could feel Vor pushing against her, urging her to give in to the power, to take the fight to the Void's heart. But if she did, she feared she would lose herself completely. One last push. "Myra, it's now or never," Eric shouted. Myra turned toward the squad, her eyes scanning the horizon. The Void was closing in on the last group of refugees. They didn't have much time left. She knew what she had to do. "Cover me," she shouted as she sprinted toward the center of the battlefield, her body moving like a blur. As she reached the heart of the Void's forces, she could feel the power of Vor coursing through her veins. She unleashed everything she had. Energy blasts, lightning storms, torrents of fire, obliterating the Void's forces in a single massive strike. The ground shook beneath her as the battlefield was engulfed in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the Void's forces were no more. But so was Myra. She had given everything. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. The voices in her mind were silent now, but the power of Vor still clung to her, its presence filling every fiber of her being. Stay in control. Stay in control. But the battle was far from over. The Void would return, and she would have to face them again. Eric rushed to her side, his face pale with concern. Myra, you did it, but at what cost? Myra could barely speak, her body racked with exhaustion. She had won the battle, but she feared the war was only just beginning. And this time, the cost might be too high. The skies above darkened, the void ships once again looming on the horizon. They were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had consumed everything. Betrayal in the void. The storm raged in the deep expanse of space, dark clouds swirling across the vastness of the galaxy. The rebel fleet was on the move, trying to outrun the void's relentless pursuit. Myra stood on the bridge of their flagship, staring out at the shimmering stars in the distance. The tension was palpable. After the recent battle, they'd won a temporary victory, but the void wasn't done. They never were. But there was something else in the air, something that didn't feel right. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the ship, cutting through the tense silence. Incoming transmission from the void, the communications officer shouted. Before anyone could react, the ship lurched violently. Myra's heart sank as the hull groaned under the pressure of an attack. The screens in front of her flickered, and the lights dimmed. Panic spread through the crew like wildfire. Something was wrong. "We've been betrayed," Eric said, his voice sharp with realization. Someone on board gave them our location. The rebel fleet was no longer safe. The traitor had done their job too well. Myra had barely enough time to react before a blast from the void's fleet tore through the ship's outer defenses. The bridge crew scrambled as explosions rocked the ship, and Myra felt the cold grip of fear for the first time since the war began. Eric grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the emergency escape pod. "We need to get out of here, Myra. Now." But it was too late. A shadow descended on them. From the smoke and chaos, dark armored figures appeared. The void had infiltrated their ship. Myra fought back, but the enemy soldiers were too many, their weapons too powerful. She was quickly surrounded and restrained. "Don't bother," one of the void soldiers sneered, his voice cold and mechanical. "Resistance is futile, human." In the span of moments, Myra was subdued and dragged to the void's flagship, her body struggling against the restraints that held her in place. The journey through the corridors of the enemy ship was disorienting. Every turn felt like it took her deeper into the heart of the void's stronghold. The ship was massive, a twisted monument of alien technology that pulsed with an eerie, unnatural light. Myra's mind raced as they transported her through long, cold corridors. She could feel the presence of Vor, still deep inside her, its power barely contained. It whispered to her, its thoughts entwining with hers. The voice was calming, but also dangerous, urging her to release the full force of the armor. "You can destroy them all," it suggested. "Take control." But Myra pushed the thought aside. She couldn't lose herself to the power. Not now. They threw her into a small, sterile cell. She was alone for what felt like hours, the silence pressing in on her. She tried to focus, to come up with a plan, but it was impossible. The betrayal, the loss of her team, it all weighed on her heart like a stone. Suddenly, the door to the cell slid open, and two void leaders entered. One was tall and thin, his skin a sickly pale gray. The other was shorter, with jagged features and dark, glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through Myra's very soul. "You're not like the others," the tall void leader said, his voice rich with cold malice. "You carry something inside you, something powerful, something ancient." Myra glared at him, refusing to speak. But inside, the fear was creeping in. What did they want with her? "We are aware of the armor you wear," the shorter leader spoke, his voice even colder than his companions. "Vor, a relic of an ancient war, an artifact of unimaginable power. We've studied it for eons, but we've never encountered a human who could bond with it. Until now." Myra's blood ran cold. She had always known that the armor was powerful, but she had no idea of the depth of its origins, or the danger it posed. If the Void knew what Vor was capable of, it meant they had a far-reaching plan, And she was the key to it all. "What do you want from me?" Myra demanded, trying to mask the fear in her voice. She had to hold on. She couldn't let them see her fear. "We don't want you," the tall Void leader said. "We want Vor. And we will have it, whether you want us to or not." Myra was dragged before a large holographic display, showing a vast expanse of the galaxy. There were dots everywhere, each one marking a system, a civilization. And one by one, those dots started to blink out of existence. The Void was not just invading, they were consuming. "This is our purpose," the shorter leader continued. "The Void does not conquer, it devours. And it grows. It will expand until all life, all civilizations, are consumed, leaving nothing but emptiness. And you, Myra, you are the key to our victory. With your bond to Vor, we will be unstoppable." Myra's stomach twisted. She had always known the Void was relentless, but she never understood the full scale of their destruction. It was beyond anything she had imagined. They weren't just here to conquer. They were here to erase everything. "You'll never control me," Myra spat, her defiance clear despite the situation. The taller leader smirked. "We don't need to control you. We need to control Vor. And once we have you connected to the armor fully, the entire galaxy will bend to our will. You will serve the Void." Myra's heart pounded. She could feel the pressure building in her chest. Vor had never seemed more alive, its energy surging, pulling at her consciousness. It wanted to break free. It wanted to destroy. "No," Myra screamed, clenching her fists. "I won't let you turn me into one of you." But the Void leaders were unfazed. "You won't have a choice. We will push you to the brink, human. And when you break, Vor will be ours. You are already more ours than you realize." The air around Myra crackled with energy as she felt the armor's power pushing against her. Stronger, darker. She fought to stay conscious, to stay herself, but the Void leader's words, their control, were too much. The armor was too strong. "You don't understand," she gasped, her voice trembling. "You think you're using me, but you're wrong. Vor will never serve you." The taller leader stepped forward, his cold eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that." The cell door slammed shut, and Myra was left alone in the darkness. But as the door sealed, a faint voice whispered in her ear, Vor's voice. "This is your moment, Myra. Let go. Embrace the power." Her breath came in short gasps. She was at the edge, teetering between control and chaos. What would happen when she let go? Could she save the galaxy, or would she become the very thing she swore to destroy? As the voices in her mind grew louder, Myra closed her eyes, wondering if there was any way left to resist. The awakening. The cold, sterile darkness of the Void's prison ship pressed in around Myra. Silence engulfed her, broken only by the steady hum of the alien machinery. She stood alone in the small cell, a prisoner in her own body, her mind warring against the power of the armor inside her. Vor's whispers had grown louder, more insistent. It wanted her to give in, to embrace its full power. It promised victory, promised strength beyond measure. "Let go," it coaxed. "Release the chains that bind you. Become the weapon you were always meant to be." Myra's fists clenched, and for the first time, she felt a surge of pure rage within her. The Void's leaders had underestimated her. They thought they could control her, but they didn't understand. They had awakened something in her, something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. And now she was ready to awaken it fully. It started slowly at first. Myra could feel her body trembling as energy surged from within her. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, a burning sensation that spread from her chest to her limbs. Her veins pulsed with the heat of Vor's power, and her mind teetered on the edge of madness. But then, a deep, resonating voice cut through the storm of thoughts. "You are ready, Myra. The final form is yours." The armor responded. Myra's skin shimmered with energy as the crystalline core embedded in her chest began to glow brighter. Her eyes burned with the light of 1,000 suns, and the air around her crackled with untamed power. She could feel her body changing, morphing into something other. The human part of her screamed in protest, but the new, more powerful part of her, the part that had become one with Vor, laughed, cold and unstoppable. With a roar, Myra's form exploded outward in a burst of blinding light. Her body became an ethereal, glowing figure, pure energy, a vessel for weaponized rage. The armor, once a passive, reactive entity, was now an active force, controlling her movements, enhancing her strength, and filling her with unrelenting fury. She had unlocked Vor's final form, but with it came a price. Myra staggered back, feeling the weight of the transformation. Her body was no longer entirely hers. The power of Vor coursed through her, but it came at a cost that was becoming clearer by the second. Her vision blurred, her thoughts fractured, and she could feel something important slipping away. Her soul, the essence of who she was, every pulse of power, every burst of energy that rippled through her body was eating away at the core of her humanity. She could feel it. It was like a fire inside her, burning away the parts that made her human. The thought of giving in, of letting the armor take full control, was tempting. The power, the strength, it was intoxicating. But then, she remembered everything she had lost. The people who had died because of the void, the friends she had failed, the lives she had promised to protect. She couldn't let go. Not now. Not when the galaxy needed her more than ever. But could she stop it? Could she control the overwhelming tide of energy coursing through her, or would she be consumed by it? The Void's stronghold was massive, its command center located deep within a labyrinth of corridors and chambers. Myra knew she didn't have much time. The Void leaders were preparing for something catastrophic, and she had to stop it. The door to her cell opened with a hiss, and 2 Void soldiers stepped inside, their dark armor gleaming under the ship's harsh lights. But Myra was no longer the woman they had captured. She was something else now, something far more dangerous. The soldiers didn't stand a chance. In an instant, Myra's new form erupted in a blinding flash. Her hands, now crackling with energy, shot out in a wave of pure light. The Void soldiers were thrown back with a scream, their armor disintegrating under the force of her attack. The power was overwhelming, like nothing she had ever felt before. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Every instinct, every fiber of her being screamed for more. She needed to kill. She needed to destroy. The rage that fueled her was like a drug, and she couldn't stop herself. Her thoughts became scattered, fragmented. She wasn't just fighting the Void anymore. She was fighting herself. Stay in control, she thought desperately. You can do this. But control was slipping through her fingers like sand. As she moved deeper into the ship, her steps becoming more erratic, more violent, the whispers in her mind grew louder. You are the weapon, Vor told her. You are the Star Reaper. They cannot stop you. Myra's vision flickered, and for a moment, she saw flashes of the past, the people she had loved, the faces of her fallen comrades. Her heart twisted in pain. What had she become? Was this really the only way? Was the cost of victory too high? But the Void was closing in. The galaxy was dying. There was no time for hesitation. With a roar, Myra pushed forward. Her hands crackled with destructive energy as she tore through the corridors of the ship, her mind focused solely on the task at hand, to destroy the Void before they could destroy everything she loved. Myra reached the command center of the Void flagship, where the leaders were waiting. They were calm, composed, as if they had known she would come for them. The leader she had faced before stepped forward, his eyes glowing with cold malice. You've unlocked it, haven't you? He said, his voice a mocking whisper. Vor's final form. But you're too late, Myra. The galaxy is ours. Your power is meaningless. Myra's hands pulsed with energy, and for a moment, she could feel the darkness inside her rising. The rage, the desire for destruction. It was almost too much to bear, but she couldn't let it consume her. She had to fight for the future of the galaxy, for the people she loved. "You're wrong," Myra said, her voice trembling with the weight of the power inside her. "I will not let you win." With that, she unleashed the full force of Vor's power. The room exploded in a flash of light, the force of her attack throwing the Void Leaders back. Myra's body crackled with energy, a living weapon of destruction. But as the light began to fade, Myra felt a strange emptiness inside her. Her vision blurred. She could feel her soul burning, slipping away with every passing second. The armor had taken more than she had ever imagined. Myra collapsed to her knees, her body glowing with residual energy. She had won. But at what cost? Her heart raced, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The power was overwhelming, and she could feel herself slipping away. The last remnants of her humanity clung to her, but they were fading fast. Was it worth it? She wondered, as the world around her began to darken. She had unlocked Vor's full potential, but in doing so, she had unlocked something darker inside herself. Would she survive the cost? Or would she become just another weapon in the Void's endless war? The answer was uncertain. The last flame. The sky above was a swirling mass of darkness. The black spiral had consumed everything. Stars, planets, even hope. The galaxy, once filled with life and light, was now a cold, empty void. Myra stood at the edge of a shattered world, her heart heavy with the weight of the war. Around her, the remnants of the rebel fleet gathered, battered but determined. They were her last hope. The Void's home dimension, the black spiral, loomed ahead, a vast and impenetrable mass of darkness. No one had ever survived a journey into it. But Myra had no choice. The galaxy needed her. "Ready, Commander." A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Corin, her closest ally, his eyes full of determination. Myra nodded grimly. "We don't have time to wait. We launch now." And with that, the last desperate counterattack began. The fleet moved in formation, a small cluster of ships against the endless black expanse of the black spiral. The battle was not just a physical one. It was a battle of wills. The Void had swallowed entire star systems, erasing them from existence. It was as if the black spiral had become a living force, feeding off the galaxy's despair. As the fleet neared the edge of the black spiral, strange ripples appeared in the fabric of reality. Time seemed to warp and bend, twisting the very essence of space. Myra could feel the pull of the spiral, a dark force that threatened to tear apart everything she had fought for. Inside her, the power of Vor still raged, a constant reminder of the price she had paid. It was both a blessing and a curse. Her body was more weapon than human now, but every time she used its power, it came at the cost of her own soul. She clenched her fists, pushing the thoughts aside. There was no time for doubt. This was it, the last chance. As they entered the black spiral, the ships began to shake. The very air around them seemed to distort, and a low hum filled the silence. Myra's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let fear take hold. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the trembling ship. "We either win here, or we lose everything." The fleet pushed deeper into the black spiral, its dark tendrils wrapping around them like the jaws of some ancient beast. The stars they had once known were now hidden, swallowed by an endless abyss. And then the first wave of the Void attacked. It came without warning. A fleet of alien ships, sleek and dark, rising from the depths of the spiral. Their weapons flashed with blinding intensity, cutting through the ships of the rebel fleet. Myra's heart sank as explosions rang out, lighting the darkness around them. "We're losing them," Corin shouted over the comms. Myra's eyes narrowed. She could feel the pressure building inside her chest. The Void was no longer just an enemy. It was a force of nature, and it was winning. Her hand clenched around the controls, her mind already racing. She could feel Vor urging her to unleash its full power, to burn the Void away with a single blow. But she resisted. She couldn't let the armor take over. Not now. "Focus," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We've come this far. We fight together." The fleet pushed forward, firing on all cylinders. The ships of the Void retaliated in kind, their weapons tearing through the rebel fleet. Every ship that fell brought them one step closer to defeat. Myra's heart ached with every loss, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. The black spiral was a maze of swirling darkness and shifting time, and every moment felt like an eternity. Her mind began to unravel, time itself feeling like it was collapsing in on itself. The strain was unbearable, but she refused to show weakness. She glanced at the stars ahead, their light flickering weakly through the swirling chaos. They were close. She could feel it. The heart of the Void was within reach. But just as hope seemed within grasp, a new force emerged from the depths of the black spiral. A massive ship, unlike anything Myra had ever seen, appeared in the distance. It was a behemoth, an impossible structure of dark metal and energy, its very presence warping the fabric of reality around it. "This is their flagship," Corin said, his voice tight with fear. "We need to stop it before it reaches the core." Myra swallowed hard. "All ships, focus fire on that flagship. We need to take it down before it's too late." The battle raged on. The rebel ships fought valiantly, but the Void's forces were overwhelming. Myra could feel the weight of their losses, the desperation of every fighter, every crew member. They were fighting for survival, for a future that seemed to be slipping away. Then, in the chaos of the battle, a terrible realization hit her. A rebel ship, one that had been fighting alongside them, suddenly turned its guns on the fleet. Myra watched in shock as it fired on the ships around her. The traitor had struck. Who is this?" Myra demanded, her voice breaking. "Commander, it's Callan. He's turned. He's with the Void." Corin's voice came in a whisper, disbelief in his tone. Callan. Myra had trusted him, fought beside him. And now he had betrayed them. Her heart burned with a mixture of rage and sorrow. They had been so close. And now betrayal threatened to tear them apart. "Corin, stop him. Stop him now," Myra ordered, her voice cold with fury. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't afford to. But it was too late. Callan's ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking several rebel ships with it. The blast sent shockwaves through the fleet, scattering them further apart. Myra's ship lurched violently, and she struggled to keep control. But amidst the chaos, she could see the flagship of the Void drawing closer. Its massive weapons were charging, preparing to destroy everything in their path. "Commander," Corin said, his voice filled with desperation, "we can't hold them off much longer." Myra's mind raced. They were losing. The galaxy was on the edge of destruction. She had one chance left. "Myra," Corin's voice crackled through her comms again. "We need to retreat. We can't win this." But Myra refused to listen. She could feel the pull of Vor's power once again, tempting her to unleash its full force, to destroy the Void, to burn everything to ash. She clenched her teeth, pushing the thoughts aside. "No," she said, her voice low but firm. "We finish this now." She pulled the lever, engaging the ship's final weapons. The battle became a blur of light and fire, each moment a desperate cry for survival. The flagship of the Void fired, and Myra's ship rocked violently from the impact. But they kept fighting. "Don't stop," Myra shouted, her voice rising over the battle. "We're not finished yet." And then, with one final push, the rebel fleet unleashed everything they had. The Void flagship faltered, its shields cracking under the barrage of fire. Myra's heart raced. This was it. But just as the flagship began to disintegrate, the universe itself seemed to shudder. Time fractured. The Void around them bent and twisted. Myra looked at the chaos around her, her heart sinking. The Void's flagship was crumbling, but the galaxy itself was collapsing into darkness. Something was wrong. Something far worse than she had imagined. The black spiral was swallowing everything, and no one was safe. Her comms crackled one last time. "Commander, it's not over. It's just begun." And then the signal went dead. The Star Reaper. The galaxy was on fire. Stars blinked out of existence, consumed by the void's endless hunger. Myra's ship plunged deeper into the heart of darkness, the last hope of the galaxy. She could feel the weight of the world, of countless lives, bearing down on her. The rebel fleet had been shattered. The void had triumphed. But not yet. Not if Myra had anything to say about it. As she guided her ship into the swirling heart of the black spiral, she could see it. The Void Mother's lair. A massive living fortress that pulsed with dark energy. It was from here that all destruction flowed, the source of the Void's terrible power. Her mind buzzed with the weight of what was to come. She knew this fight would cost her everything. But the galaxy needed a hero. It needed the Star Reaper. She took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. The ship shuddered as it approached the center of the black spiral. Myra had no idea how long she had been in the void, but it felt like an eternity. Every moment in this twisted dimension warped her sense of time. Every second an eternity. But she had no choice. The Void Mother was here, and if she didn't stop it now, everything would be lost. The rebels had fallen. There was no one left to fight. The Void's invasion had consumed everything, leaving nothing behind but destruction. Myra had failed to protect her people, failed to stop the darkness from spreading. But she would not fail again. In the distance, the Void Mother's fortress loomed. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a living organism of pure darkness. Its tendrils stretched out, reaching across the stars, feeding off the life force of everything it touched. Myra's heart pounded in her chest. She had to destroy it. She had to kill the Void Mother. But there was one problem. She couldn't do it alone. And she couldn't do it with just her weapons. She glanced over at the dormant core of a dying star. The last stellar core, the weapon that could destroy the darkness. It was the only chance she had left. But using it would cost her everything. Her life. Her humanity. She had no choice. Inside the heart of the Void's fortress, Myra saw her. The Void Mother. The architect of annihilation. She was enormous, her form shifting like a mass of writhing shadows. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, full of ancient wisdom and immeasurable power. "You think you can stop me?" The Void Mother's voice echoed in Myra's mind, cold and mocking. "You, a mere human. What can you do against me, against the Void?" Myra clenched her fists. "I'm not just a human. I'm the one who will end this." The Void Mother laughed, the sound like 1,000 screams. "You think you can destroy the Void. You think you can destroy me. You're nothing more than a fleeting spark in the darkness. You can't stop what has already begun." Myra gritted her teeth. "Maybe not, but I can stop you." And with that, she charged. The battle was fierce. Myra fought with every ounce of strength she had left, using Vor's power to its fullest extent. Light and fire exploded around her, a fury of energy that pushed the Void Mother back. But even as Myra struck, the Void Mother's power surged, her darkness creeping into every crack in Myra's defenses. It was clear now. This battle was not just for the galaxy. It was for Myra's very soul. Each time she used Vor's power, a part of her slipped away. She could feel it, could feel her humanity fading with each strike. She had to finish this. She raced toward the dying stellar core, knowing that only it could give her the strength she needed to defeat the Void Mother. But it wasn't enough just to use it. She had to channel the power of the core, to turn it into something greater. And that meant sacrificing everything. "You're too weak," the Void Mother sneered. "You can't possibly control it." But Myra knew better. She had no choice but to try. She had come this far. She couldn't turn back. With a scream, Myra plunged her hands into the stellar core. Pain shot through her body, the intensity of the energy almost unbearable. She could feel her skin burning, her bones cracking under the strain. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The power surged through her, consuming her from the inside out. Vor's presence inside her, the light and rage, intensified, swirling together with the energy of the core. Myra's vision blurred as the core's energy began to bend reality around her. Time slowed. She felt herself changing. Her body, her very essence, was being transformed by the power she was wielding. Her flesh burned away, leaving only the pure light of her soul, the light of the Star Reaper. The Void Mother roared, her darkness swirling violently around Myra. "No," she shrieked. "You can't destroy me. I am eternal." But Myra didn't hesitate. She had no fear. She was no longer the woman she once was. She was the Star Reaper now, a being of pure energy and unstoppable force. With a final cry, she unleashed the power of the stellar core, sending a wave of pure light crashing into the Void Mother. The darkness screamed, writhing in agony as the light tore through it, ripping the Void Mother's form apart. For a moment, the entire universe seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a flash of blinding light, the Void Mother was gone. The galaxy was free. But Myra, the woman who had once been human, was no more. She was the Star Reaper, a legend reborn in the heart of the darkness. The battle was over. The Void Mother was destroyed. The galaxy was saved. But Myra's sacrifice had come at a terrible cost. Her body, consumed by the stellar core's power, was now nothing more than pure energy, a being of light. She had become a force of nature, the living weapon of unimaginable power. But was it worth the cost? As the stars began to flicker back into existence, a new question loomed. What would become of Myra now? The galaxy had been saved, but at what price? And where would the Star Reaper go next? The story of Myra, the Star Reaper, had just begun. To be continued.